Starting. Good. Should be going. Okay, wonderful. So let's pick up there. Yeah, it's been 2 years ago since our last conversation, right? So
yeah, correct.
A lot has happened, and the reason why I wanted to continue and get an update is because of that, right? Lots has happened on your side, but of course also on mine. Mm-hmm. And what I would like to focus on is really getting an understanding of your work, mm-hmm. because your work is an important contributor towards the upgrade of how we do things, right? Coming up with new ways of thinking about ownership. Mm-hmm. I think that's at the core of the changes in the social contract we need to come up with. Mm-hmm. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to transcribe this conversation, and it's going to be added to a repository of similar conversations that then people can start exploring through simple text search, and cool. And find this, and then link from there to interesting additional resources like your upcoming book.
Okay, cool, awesome.
So I'm pretty sure that you're charged with a lot of things you want to share, and maybe a good starting point for that is the essence of the how you are now describing what you do, and the underlying theory, because you obviously have thought that through properly, because you put it into a book, right?
Yeah, well, I think the exercise of putting it into a book was more a necessity than than something I wanted to do absolutely as one of the things in my bucket list. But the experience I had is that it's quite hard to for me at least, to like get my ideas out in a structured way. Mm-hmm. My mind works in mysterious ways sometimes, and so I think taking the time to like formalize them and crystallize them and talk them through, and like writing a book, it took us a little over a year to do so. So it's something that you take your time for. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was a very important thing to do, because it's a very broad thought train. Mm-hmm. It's not something that you can summarize very easily. And I think one of the things you said there is that we find ways of upgrading or iterating out of the current systems, and I'm not sure that's even possible, because I think we spend, like, I think the mess we're in today is, as far as I'm concerned, is the result of the last 10,000 years of evolution and the perfection of force. So I don't think that the powers we have put in place have any incentive to see that changed. And so the idea of upgrading it is something that is not something that resonates with me. I do believe, however, that like, for example, the market is the only real fair and equitable way to exchange stuff. So there are good things in what we actually do now.
Well, let me interrupt you there briefly, because I had a very fun conversation with Tyson Yokoporta a while ago, and he coined something around the market which totally resonates with me, which he said, well, what if the invisible hand of the market is not a hand? What if it's a cock? And that is a very nice image to describe that the signaling function is distorted, right? So if 26 white old men can have as much signaling capacity in the market as half of humanity, the markets don't work.
Exactly. And I think it's even worse. We are so proud, even if we don't consider the global scope, which is exactly what you said, like this is that. But even if we consider only our perspective, where we are experiencing the free market, well, I think that's an illusion as well. we actually live, the paradigm in which we live in is actually an illusion. And that is the main reason why it's so hard for most people to experience and to see the force that surrounds them, is because we've grown used to it. It's like, it's how it is. There is no further thinking about why are the things like they are, and how does that work, and how does that relate. And so even the so-called free market we have today is not free. It's controlled by even a smaller percentage of probably both white men. And so I think there's a big problem
but
there as well.
Okay, so you, you're basically saying two things. One is, over the last 10,000 years, we've built up an illusion that has created a lot of perfection of force, which I would say can be seen in centralization of all kinds of power, signaling power in markets / money, or knowledge / patents, or expensive universities, or political decision power, etc. So we've really centralized that, and we've put big, strong guards around that, which is the force, right? Now, that's the one thing. And then you're saying, okay, we cannot fight that force. But when we break through the understanding that this is just an illusion, we don't even have to fight the force, we just ignore it.
I think you cannot ignore the force, because the force is there, and I think the fact that it's centralized is not even a surprise. So to me, and the reason I refer to 10,000 years ago, because that's right before the first agricultural revolution, and actually the invention of private property happened around that time, where a settler put like kind of a fence around his piece of gardened stuff to like prevent other ones to get in. And obviously, when, well, you have a choice between running after your deer or just like taking it in the fence, it's obviously easier to take it in the fence. But and so the first force appears, where they say, no, you cannot go inside this fence is mine, and so you stay out. And the principles of the business of force is consolidating by definition, because it's always a winner takes all. If you have the farmer on the left side of you who also has his fence and has force, now if your force takes his fence, so you make it bigger, then if your force wins, then you get two, and there is only one. There is only one market, and it's the major force that gets the market. And so that evolves from private militia to kingdoms to all kinds of stuff that we've experienced over the years, and that now crystallizes in the government and countries and sovereignty, which is the final form that we've adopted for quite some time now. But it's the same principle. So it's always, this is mine, this is yours, and if I win, then I take yours, and there is no more competition. And I think that's also the major problem with it, is that by taking away the competition, you take away the need to make it more efficient and more intelligent, and you stop innovating. And I think that's one of the major problems, is that the structures we put in place have kind of the specificity of crystallizing into something. And that's totally opposed to how nature works. Nature does not crystallize. Nature evolves constantly, learns, changes. But nature is a natural construct, whereas the other ones, like the force constructs, are artificial constructs, are constructs we made ourselves, and so they become stale. And I think it's not so much about opposing the force. I think it's the major the first step is to acknowledge it, to know that it's there. And because I think most of the time, and most of the people don't even know there is force, and there is force in all kinds of, it's not always a very physical or felt force. There is force on all kinds of levels, and most people don't even realize it. And I think being really aware of the force around you, and then at the same time starting to like acknowledge your innate needs, and so understand what it's about, actually, I think gives you an option to step aside, and I think create not something that's against, because I don't believe in being against something, but I do more believe like creating what they call a heterotopia. So it's like an augmented version of the present, where everything is not good or bad, but sufficiently different to give us like the space to define and wield the tools we choose and new stuff.
Okay. And so how does that, how do you call it, the heterotopia?
Heterotopia is just like, it's not a utopia. Utopia is something that's fantastic or something that's imagined, and a heterotopia is something that is grounded into the present, but with tweaks. It's still, it's a place out of the place, right? So it's like, it's something that's almost like what we know, but the minor tweaks they are make it react very differently. And I think the heterotopia is kind of the place we need to imagine. It's something that's there, that's not menacing to whatever is in place today, but that creates an opt-in environment where you can just like try things differently.
Okay. So and what are you so if that is the underlying foundation of your thinking process, then there must be some most important elements in the heterotopia that you're developing out of that. So I'm curious about what are the foundational or most important pillars that you see there in the question of, okay, how do we tweak reality towards something that is actually better?
Well, I think one of the first things we have to do is acknowledge our human nature, and so acknowledge that there are some sharp edges, to say the least. And so I think we need to put in place an environment of can't be evil instead of don't be evil. And to me, can't be evil is only possible if you remove power plays, and that's the beginning of the thought train there. So how do we remove power plays? Where are they? Once you identify them, how can we get rid of them? And so
define power play for this context.
The private property is a power play, for example, but also getting hired is a power play. A hierarchical situation is a power play. Governments are power plays. Shareholdership in a company is power play.
But where do you draw the line? So a wife going on sex strike to get something is also a power play. So where do you draw the line?
I think you don't draw the line. You acknowledge. Okay. You acknowledge what there is, and you try to do without power play. And I think there are two major things we need to be mindful of. As the first one, so it's the human. How do we, as a person, how do I get into the right mindset, into the right attitude? What do I show? How do I interact, collaborate? How am I? In order to not go on sex strikes and do that kind of stuff. So that's the first part. So how as a human am I? And then the second part is, how do I, in what kind of an environment can I be operating that supports that kind of thinking, where we have more collaboration and less competition. So that kind of drawbacks. And so for me, the idea is all centered around creating an environment for true frictionless collaboration, person to person. So it's really person to person. That's the thing we need to get through. And I think personally that the technology, and I don't mean that in the only the IT kind of way, because that's my background, but technology at large, also social technology and so on, is developed enough to give us as a civilization a serious shot at trying out something like that. So we have the tools we need to try and create that environment that where we are guided by our innate needs without force, and are able to like balance out more our quality of life and work more on that.
So I can see person to person playing out on small scales. Mm-hmm. So where we correct each other in our behavior and our actions, and self-correct because of the immediacy of the sanctions and the consequences of our actions, right? So we can, but as soon as we grow in scale as a group, and let's use the Dunbar scale, right? So let's say it starts breaking down at around 4,000 people. Mm-hmm. So so how do you see that? Do you have a theory of how does that scale beyond numbers like that?
What that doesn't, and I think that's a good thing, because as a human we are. But I read somewhere, and I don't know where it was, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Mm-hmm. So if you try to grow, even the Dunbar scale to me is too big. If you try to grow beyond the people you know and the community you're involved in and your personal impact, then you start putting artificial constructs in place, which you hope will kind of direct the things that are ongoing in the way that you want them to be going. And I think that's a wrong assumption. Well, that's a good assumption, but I think it's an unrealistic assumption. I think as people, we need to accept that we are limited in our communities, and that we need to develop technology to be very efficient at working inside our communities and very going back to the old ways almost. And that technology can be adapted for communication between groups, but you only need to put in place some collaboration when the two groups have something to collaborate on. So there is no need for global like kind of regulation or whatever. It's I think that's the megalomaniac thinking of humans that think that they can like control it all. I would rather go back to very small scale stuff and let go of what you cannot control because it's not yours to control.
Okay, so there are a couple of things that come up for me here, and one is I can totally 100% see that scenario, and I'm curious about the social technologies you have in mind to stay in equilibrium. So how do we in such communities downregulate the inevitable 1 or 2% of socio and psychopaths? So that's one aspect. And the second aspect is there are some things that we would like to coordinate on a global scale, which, for example, making it possible, like we do now, to speak across continents or across one continent, we're in the same continent, but to speak across hundreds and hundreds of kilometers with one another. So having a global satellite network or something like that. And that is a global coordination function. How do we solve that? So these two questions are front of mind for me.
There obviously, and again, I think the important thing here to say is that I am not a macroeconomist or whatever. So I'm just a guy who tries stuff out.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so that's and I think that's the right attitude.
Oh, I
It's
agree.
about just trying out stuff. And what I found to be working, or where I found interesting insights, is, for example, the work that Eleanor Ostrom has done on the core design principles. So those are very interesting ways of finding consensus within a group, and not regulating, because I don't like rules.
Mhm.
I prefer to talk about tools, because tools is something that we make for ourselves. So
Mm.
we make tools
Mhm.
to work together, and the tools are agreements, are ways in which we hold each other accountable
Mhm.
of stuff. And so the core design principles help us identify a couple of steps that we certainly have to take. And the first one is aligning on why, in the first place, we are a group, and
Mhm.
because that's already a very important thing. And then I think and there are other ones, because those are the core design principles. But you also, on a personal level, as you said earlier, people in the current situation, people need to learn a whole lot of new skills before being able to apply this in a correct
Mhm.
way.
Mhm.
And so there is a whole path. I think Marsha Linehan did a lot of work on that from the dialectical perspective, with the balancing out the emotional mind and rational mind, and kind of uh, being aware of the mechanics that are there, acknowledging that friction is not something bad, and
Mhm.
conflict, that it's something that invites you to, like, change and talk about it, and do things differently. And so I think what emerges out of that is something that I went to the conscious contract community for, to once you have this kind of way of doing, then how do we formalize this in a way that, as a group, we can, like, we understand what we've committed to, and we can stick to it.
Mhm.
And this is, well, this is one of the very important first steps towards not having a power play, because then you are in a group because you choose to, and you're not in a
Mhm.
group if you don't choose to. So there is no hiring, there is no firing, there is just an understanding of what your place is there, and why you're there, and what you do for to be there.
Mhm.
Um, and then I think, to come back to your question about the global coordination, I think we don't need global coordination to put a satellite network over the world. If you look at Elon Musk and his team, I'm sure they're, like, far from the Dunbar number,
Mhm.
and they're doing the stuff there.
Mhm.
So I think also this is about groups of people doing certain things and coordinating within a certain amount of um, uh, well, within a manageable community. And then you have inter-community relationships, which are obviously, because if they have a satellite network and we need one, then we probably should discuss how that's going to go.
Mm.
How much do they want for it? How are we going to able to use? Are there policies? Are there not? And that's a negotiation that takes place. And I think that's how it started as well. It's about, you have something that I want to use, and I can use it, and so that's an exchange. And I think that's how it started. But the I think, and that is also our quest. I think um, to do things more efficiently. We say, okay, we solved this problem once, so let's write that down. And
Mhm.
from now on, every time we have the same problem, that's like how we solve it. And then you get a, a book with the laws and regulations, who are like uh, inches big,
Mhm.
and you try to find ways to get across, and what all new kinds of problems that appear
Mhm.
because you try to do it like that.
Mhm.
But as far as I'm concerned, if my group wants a relationship with the group providing internet connection, then we have an agreement. There is no need well, for them, there are some needs on their side, there will be some needs on our side, and if we meet, then we have an agreement. And as long as that agreement is understood, then no other group should like interfere on that agreement. There is no need. They can make their own agreements.
But how do you deal with power asymmetries? So in that example, I mean, let's play out the example of the satellite network. In order to have a satellite network, you need to have a way to bring satellites to space. So you need, at the very least, highly sophisticated catapults, or reusable rockets, or something like that. So that's something you have to build first. And then, of course, a satellite network, you have to maintain it. It's not many communities will be able to pull this off.
Correct. And nor should they, because if you have one network and that network is made available, then why should you need another community to do that?
So why doesn't Elon Musk make his available freely, right?
There is that he has created the network, he dictates the rules.
Exactly. And that's a power play. So we're actually speaking using the satellite network of Elon Musk. So at the moment here, and he can potentially misuse that power, right? If he's the only one, so you need some market to create an equilibrium between those power forces. And the harder the problems, the more likely it is that they're going to be centralized, and therefore also a centralization in power. And as you said earlier, power corrupts. So how can you deal with that?
And I think that is also an illustration of how we will not be able to iterate ourselves out of the solution we have today, because there is no way in the current way of working to solve this problem. The way in which it's structured today is indeed that you first need capital, and when you get the capital, you get the people, and get the people, you get the power, and that's it. And so as long as we're there is no intelligent way of changing that, and it will always stay like that. So one of the important other aspects that we have in the idea is that we need to reinvent private property in order to make that work differently. And so we acknowledge that there are, if you break it down into parts, you still have the part of the value. So you need capital, and capital is value. That's the worth of it. And then you have the usage. And now they are combined into what we call private property. So when you get private property, you get the value and the usage. And so what we argue is like, what if we separated those two, but very strictly? So value is something that you can have, but it has nothing to do with usage rights. So value is just like, I got a share of the, to make an analogy, I've got a share of the satellite company, but I have no voting rights. I have no nothing. I just have like that piece of paper that gives me an X percentage of the value of the thing that's there. I cannot steer how it goes. I cannot do anything with it, because on the other side, you have the participatory side, which is the side that says, I got a lease on this property and I can use it. And I pay for it because I use it and because I enjoy the service, so I pay for the service. But I can or cannot have its value. That's up to me. That is no, there is no specific obligation there. But I have a lease, so I can use it. And I think by separating those two, you create a system in which they both have their own lives. And most of the problems we encounter today are power plays that are put in place because of the conjunction of those two elements. And I think you remove power plays if you just separate them, and then you have, for example, if you, to I'm trying to go, like, not to go to not to lose myself into details here.
But I'm isn't it that, so I want to try to understand better where you're coming from, because that's how I see currently the situation. Because I can so the parts are separated. I could have shares in the satellite company, and I also can choose to give the satellite company some money so I can use their satellites. So they are separated.
Yes, but in practice they're not, because your share gives you a vote. If you have the value, then you can steer the company in which direction you want. Where I say it's the one who pays for the service that can steer in the direction they want. If I want to enable my satellite network for those kinds of people and not that kind of people, then if I have the lease to the use of that satellite network, then those decisions are mine to make. But I pay for that lease. So Elon Musk, if we take him back into that scenario, then he would now have the exclusive use of the satellite network, and he would sub rent it to people who are using it. So that's it. And so we could choose, like, to say, no, you can and you cannot, and that kind of stuff. But for him, there is no incentive to exclude others, because his model is like, the more people I get, the more money I make. So that's like perfect. On the value side, which is the ones who have provided the capital, they get compensated for the capital they provided, but they have no insights in what's done with the network. And so if you really look at the communities which become separate communities, which have separate interests and their own way of thinking about what they want to do and how they want to go about it, then you see that the power is in the people who pay for the usage. But usage is not something, possession is not something stale that you can have. It's, if you want to use it, you have to pay for it. And the value is something that's held by what we call that universal ownership. So it's everyone and no one at the same time. So it's something that is not steered. It's just a representation of the value of something, or the bringing in of capital in order for something to be created that wasn't existing previously.
So I'm trying to play this through now. So currently the assumption is that the holders of the value should also have the voting, because they want to maximize their return.
Yes.
Why would they give that up?
They don't want to give that up. That's not a thing.
Okay. So we're just deciding that that's how we restructure things.
Well, the thing is, they're on their side. When you invest in something, you invest in something that you think gives you the return you want to have. And if everyone decides that the return should be preposterous, then that's what we're going to get. But chances are that if we really let the market play out, that someone's going to be just that little less preposterous than the other ones. And so all of a sudden he would get it. And then the other one would say, oh, wait a second, because you let competition play on the capital market as well. And so if the market is truly open and truly free, then it's the one who makes the best proposition to give his capital or her capital or their capital. It's the person giving their capital at the best possible conditions that feels comfortable for them and feels comfortable for the ones who are wanting the capital, well, that's where you found each other, and that's what you will respect. That's the deal you've made for the capital. And so once that there, then you create your then the value gets created and the capital gets reimbursed, or you keep the capital. That's totally up to you. It's there are different mechanics that we can play out there, but in any case, you've made a deal about I give you $100 and I want you to give me 200 back, that kind of deal, or I want a 1% every month, or all the usual suspects in the range of how you could provide capital. And once that's locked in, then whatever is making the value, so in this case the satellite network, well, every time a payment comes in, then the satellite networks evaluates who should I pay back according to the rules that were predefined, and they get paid back. And if along the way they see like, whoa, this is taking off and I could make a 10x instead of a 2x, well, do better next time, right? So this time you've taken a 2x, and so you're getting your 2x. That's it. And if you wanted a 10x, then next time do a 10x. But don't be surprised if someone with an 8x takes your position and forces you out. So it's really the market. You like, I have capital, I give it to you, and those are my conditions. That's where I feel fine with.
So you're trading. So you're trying to set up this satellite company, and instead of trading the low interest rates for the capital you get for say in the company, you just give them higher interest rates, basically.
You give them what you listen to whatever the market has to offer. So you say, I've got this idea of a satellite company, and I would need to build rockets, and please give me that much money, and I will be able to pay you back in like 5 years time, or whatever, or 10 or 15 or 20.
Maybe not, because
maybe not.
There's risk attached, right? And the risk, as a investor, you want to minimize the risk.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
There are two ways of minimizing risk. So you can hedge your bets and get as much return as possible from each bet, and then some of the bets will work out. Okay, and the other one is you want to have a say in what's happening in the organization. So if we want to, how do we structure a society in which we prevent that from happening? That second part, wanting to have a say.
Well, I think that's the idea behind the universal ownership vault. So the idea is to have a DAO that is that holds the value of all the stuff in the world. So it's like a Fort Knox for stuff. All kinds of stuff, houses, cars, satellite networks, doesn't matter. And so every time you need to add something to the vault, it can be done in two ways. You either have the thing and you bring it to the vault and you say like, here it is, I don't want it anymore, put it in the vault. And you get the value back, because it was yours, so it's the value. The other way is like, I've got something that I want to put in the vault, but it doesn't exist yet. And I first need to have money in order for it to come to existence. And then you go to the market and you say, this is my plan, this is what I want to do. Please give me the funds that I need to create the stuff that I'm talking about. And once the stuff is created, then the value goes to the ones who gave you the capital, because they like have the value, and you try to realize what you said you will be realizing. And in the process of realizing that, you get back that value, because now it's your value now, because the ones who initially gave the capital have got their bets back. And if they don't have their bet back, then what you said is true. It's about balancing out your risk, and you either have lost a bet, or you have one that which could be like a loan, which gives you 2% every year, something like that, which is also possible, and you never get your value back, but you get 2% every year. So that's also one of the. So there are a whole set of the classical ways of finding finance or funding.
Okay, I think that idea of the vault unlocked something for me. Let me repeat that so to see that I understand. So basically, there's the option of selling your assets into a marketplace of the commons. So I put my Jeep in there, and then I get some token back. And now what happens with the Jeep?
Well, the Jeep becomes what we call a sovereign asset. So the Jeep is sovereign now, and it fulfills its purpose. And its purpose is, well, the purpose of a Jeep is probably to transport people to places where it's harder to get to. And so to fulfill that purpose, it will put itself on the market and say, who wants to use me? And someone, which we call this is on the participation side. This is the people who are doing stuff. They say, oh, I want transportation, so I'm willing to rent this Jeep, and I'm offering $100 a month. And some other collaborative would say, you know what, I really need that one too, and I'll give 120. And so the market again decides what's the usage rights of the Jeep. And if you want to keep the Jeep for yourself, then you say, I'm gonna rent it because I need the Jeep also. And so the practicality here is that, and maybe the Jeep is not the best example, but whatever. I think the practicality here is that we go towards a system where when you don't need the Jeep anymore, you will not keep on paying for its usage because you don't need it anymore. And you would just say, you know what, like, let's go of that. But in the meanwhile, if you have accumulated the value of the Jeep and someone else starts renting the Jeep, then you can decide that the value is transferred from you to that new person. And so you get like the investment capacity instead of the value. And so you get a transfer here of, it's another kind of power you get.
Okay, so in other words, that marketplace and its rules are codified globally, so that anything that's traded gets traded through that marketplace.
Yeah.
So let's break it down even one step further. I buy my beans on the local food market in a little village in Costa Rica. How does that transaction happen?
Well, I think beans would not end up in the universal ownership vault because they're like consumer goods, and they don't hold their capital because once you've eaten them, there's not much left. And so I wasn't, at least, and again, I'm far from being an expert on every domain. So as far as I conceived it, I don't think consumer goods would be universal ownership vault stuff. That's just stuff that you trade. But
the land could be, right?
The land is the equipment to harvest and to plant the beans are. The infrastructure around that is like that. And so what you would do is actually participate. So if you have the capital, you would like buy the beans because that's what you do. But you could also participate in helping that farmer grow or do something better or differently, or grow more environmental friendly, or do things differently and invest in the way in which they do something in order for you as a user of the service to be closer to your personal values. But at the same time, you remain that you might come in on the capital side, which gives you an insight on how that works, but it doesn't give you any right to like go and say how he should do his beans. That is the formal separation that we have there.
Okay. So production assets are held in the universal ownership vault.
Yes.
So with the Jeep, I could rent it and sell a service of, for example, bringing somebody across the river. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And
again, those two twists, let's say, build on top of what we've discussed earlier about the mindset and the attitude and the collaborative agreement and the whole stack of working towards being a different kind of human in society. And that is like kind of the economic twist we give it. But the economic twist is still very much compatible with what we have today. So it's nothing new. We did not invent something that's fundamentally different from what we have now, because those kinds of systems are used by megacorps all the time. So they build constructs to own stuff, and then the only difference is that there it's consolidated through shareholdership towards the absolute top, whereas here, since it's the value is something that's very personal, so there is no accumulation of value. There is no you as a person can hold the value of the Jeep. You can hold the value of different Jeeps and a house and some other equipment, but there is no company to hold. It's just value that you hold. And so the finance becomes something very, very personal. And what what they say in the crypto, not your keys, not your coin. That's also one of the mind shifts that we engage here, is that in a person-to-person way, there is no one between you and your value. That's just what you take with you. And so to compare this in a traditional company setting, for example, if I work, I produce, or I give my time to realize some potential. The potential that I realized comes from the production assets that I use, because I pay for them, and because I'm able to pay for them is because I put in the effort to pay for them. And so what happens is that the value that's created comes back to me personally, my finance. So there is no more company share, there is only personal finance, whether it's in value of production assets, of in treasury. Those two are possible. And yeah.
So I want to explore a little bit further into how it functions, and I know it's not a perfect example, but I want to continue with Jeep. So now the Jeep brakes.
Yeah.
And so now it needs repairing. So who makes the decision on behalf of the Jeep to order the repair?
The user. So it's always the person using the asset that makes all the decisions. The sovereign asset itself, the only thing it minds is like kind of the sustainability. To take the example of a Jeep, when a Jeep first becomes a sovereign asset, the first thing it would be thinking about is like, make sure I have a small sustainability fund, which would help me recycle myself, because that's my end game. I'm there for a while, and at some point I'm going to disappear, and so I need a little bit of money to like make myself disappear. And so that's one of the things a sovereign asset would take care of. But then it's up to the users of the Jeep to do whatever is needed. And if at some point I want to use a Jeep, but the Jeep is broken. So the best case and the most regular case would be like, I'm going to have it fixed because this is what I do and this helps me. Worst case is, what? Screw the Jeep. Let's dump the lease. I don't want a Jeep anymore. The sovereign asset would put itself on the marketplace again. And it says, I'm a broken Jeep who wants me for $100, for 99, for 98, for 97, for 96, until someone says, oh, for $1, I'll take you.
So on the surface, at least, this would be pretty easy to game if I have a car service shop. I go around declaring cars as needing service, and bring them to my service shop, and have them serviced and receive token for that.
But it's cars that you are renting, right?
I'm renting for a day, and then I say, oh, it's broken. It needs service. I bring it to my service shop, and I pay myself for the service of a car.
But with what do you pay yourself? You pay yourself with the money you pay for the rent, right? Because that's the only thing that exists. So you pay for the Jeep,
but if that exceeds my rent, then I make a profit. And so
but say that again.
If I rent it for a day, and it's and I declare that it's broken, and it has to be repaired, but the repair cost is like 3 times my rent.
But okay, wait a second. You rent it for a day, so this means that you would be and that is also something that we need to clarify. So you can go to a sovereign asset for renting and say, I want to use this production item for use. I don't think a major use case would be Hertz like rental service. I don't think that's how it's going to work. I think the Hertz would be a collaborative that does rental, that rents the Jeep on a structural base, and then rents it for a day to a person and whatever. So most of the times, the ones who are going to use the sovereign asset are going to use it for a period of time. But let's imagine that you just like rent. So the rent you pay is actually, it's your money that goes to a sovereign asset, but a sovereign asset does not enrich itself. So if you send money to a sovereign asset and the sustainability fund is dealt with, then whatever money is in there is like, it's yours, or it belongs to the one that provided the capital. There is only two possible scenarios there. So if it's yours, then gaming the system would game yourself.
Wait 1 second. Why is it mine? So I have nothing to do with that Jeep. It's not my asset. I didn't put it in. I'm just renting it for a short period of time, and then I'm declaring that I need it repaired, and the repair cost exceeds my rent. But I happen to own the repair shop, so I still make a profit. Why shouldn't I?
Well, the repair cost needs to be paid by the person's renting it, right? So because there is no one else to pay for the repairs, you are the one using it. So if you want it repaired, you go repair it. There is no money from the sovereign asset going towards the repair. That's
okay, but then renting or using some asset comes at a great risk. So if I now rent a Boeing 747 from the pool and it crashes, then I have to put in a new 747.
Normally, another the base premise of a sovereign asset would be sustainability. So being well insured would be one of the things a sovereign asset takes care of. So if a Boeing 747, and I'm absolutely not familiar with how planes are insured, but whatever happens, before the Boeing can be used, he would somehow have an insurance. Otherwise, it would not be a sovereign asset. And so the creation of the sovereign asset, and at least the first period of insurance so that the sovereign asset is sustainable. That's what's needed for it to become a sovereign asset. And so if I use it and I crash it, then the insurance repairs it and tries to get to you to like make you endorse the error or something like that. But that's not that different from what it's now. You really have to see that as like the sovereign asset is just a thing that is there, that is insured. Like for a house, you would have an insurance, and you would pay your taxes. That's also something that a sovereign asset would do. But it doesn't do maintenance, it doesn't do repairs, it doesn't do all that, because that's what the users of the sovereign asset do.
Okay.
And when they pay for the use of the sovereign asset, the money that goes there goes either to the treasury or to the capital, to pay back the capital that was needed to create it. One of the two scenarios.
Or to an insurance.
Well, partially to an insurance, obviously, yeah. So to the sustainability fund, let's call it like that.
Okay, so the sustainability fund is the maintenance element here, right? So
in a very, very small way, maintenance as in I need to legally pay my taxes as a house, and I need to be insured that in case I burn down, at least I can rebuild myself. Like that's the absolute minimum viable a premise for an asset to be functioning.
Yeah. Okay, but so let's assume that that problem goes away. That I'm trying to get my head around here by saying, okay, I as a user, I claim that something is wrong with the thing, and then there's a clever mechanism that's ensures that the crowd confirms, and that also the crowd chooses the best solution for whatever happens on behalf of the asset. So that's not an individual choice by whoever sits on the asset, but
I think because as soon as you say like the crowd is gonna decide, then you entice power plays, and then like all of a sudden it becomes controllable. And if it's controllable, then it's not a sovereign asset anymore. It's sovereign because it's not controllable. But what I think is that most of the power is in the hands of the people who are using it. We call them collaboratives. So and that those really use the sovereign asset, but they use it with their person. So it's like, I'm renting this Jeep, and if at some point I'm the one who go to the marketplace, I rent a Jeep, then I crash it and I repair it, and I go to the marketplace and I rent a Jeep, then at some point sovereign assets might say, you know what, there's someone else wanting to rent a Jeep, so maybe I'll give that one firsthand, because it seems to be that you are having some trouble with
driving Jeeps. Okay.
Yeah. So there is just a history of your behavior, and that will probably play a role too somewhere.
Yeah. So that requires, okay, history of my behavior translates into potential sanction. So if I every time I rent something, it breaks, then there must be something wrong with what I do. So there needs to be some pattern detection, and then decisions on what to do with that pattern. So now, how's the governance of this DAO structure? How does that work?
Well, the governance of that DAO, which is exactly where that kind of decision would be made, is going to be to me, I envision conviction voting there, which is the way that the people who hold the value in the vault, so the entirety of the vault, so you cannot specifically address one item in the vault, or you say that Jeep specifically, I need that differently. So it's like kind of the running of the vault for all vehicle types in Europe, for example. That would be some of the categories. I think the way in which that could be governed is through conviction voting. So conviction voting would be that the rules in the DAO you have, like that dictate the behavior. You have a versioning system. So you have like today's the rule is like we do it this way, and anyone can like fork that decision and make it differently, and then publicize like, hey guys, I got this new version and it's way better and it should be like that. And the DAO would only take the version where the most votes are supporting that specific version. So if I want a new version to get more traction, I need to like promote my version and make sure that the votes are going away from that specific point, and make my point the prominent way of doing that specific item. And so it eliminates kind of the voting mechanics. It's longer term, it's continuous. It's not something that has to be decided in one time. So it's something that stretches along the time, and makes, I think, for a stable way of controlling this. And so who are the ones exerting influence over that vault specifically? Well, those are the ones who hold the value of the vault. And so the value cards are the tokens used for voting in the DAO governance, at least the universal ownership vault governance.
So it's a version of stake, right? So you have a stake in the whole pool of value.
Yeah.
And you can categorize them maybe, but and that gives you decision power, or not decision power. It gives you voting power. But you add flexibility by creating a evolution system on rule sets, by being able to fork them. Okay.
Yeah. So on individual values, they're actually, the values are individual data streams, version data streams. So you get one actual version, and then you get a series of possible new versions, and the one who has the most conviction associated with it, well, that's the current version.
Okay. So how is such a system bootstrapped into being?
Well, there you go. That's a very good question. Well, it takes at least one crazy person.
And I'm speaking to one.
You're definitely speaking to one. So I'm having fun like bootstrapping this, because it's just fun. And this is what I like to do, and so I'm trying to like present such an environment, but the very interesting part is that in every step of the way I confront myself with the fact like, oh, but as I'm bootstrapping it, I'm exerting power over it, because now I'm saying how it should go. So there is always a point in which I'm just like, at this point, nobody cares. And so I'm just doing whatever the hell I want. So that's awesome. And at some point, I hope I'm not going to be the only one caring about it. And then we'll figure out how that goes.
By the way, when I say crazy one, I mean it in the most positive interpretation, right? So to the crazy ones of Steve Jobs, that kind of crazy. Yeah.
Yes. That's also totally my motto.
So okay, so you're the god of creation in the first iteration here, right? You're doing it.
Yeah, because actually that's the only thing I know how to do. I'm not a thinker. I'm someone who likes to like put things into practice, and it obviously takes gigantic amount of time. It's like about 6 years, I think, that I'm like bolting on this, and I could be bolting until I'm retired. I'm sure. So we'll see. To me, it's not a destination, and I think that's also a very important pillar of all this thing, is that whatever we're doing here is an environment. It's not a destination. It's not something that's finished. It's something that's growing, evolving, changing, reshaping, and so I could do it alone for the rest of my life, and then I don't know what happens after that, or maybe people join me, and then we'll be 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever, and we'll see how it goes.
What's the current state of things? Last time we spoke, there was a group of young people who were building, I'm not remembering exactly, I think it was kind of a shop, and they were thinking about doing it in the way you're proposing. So what's the concrete current state of affairs?
Well, we have some sovereign assets. So we have coffee roasters, we have like those how do you call it, food trucks. We have fridges and refrigerators and all kinds of stuff, and we have a collaborative that works and that tries to implement the concepts, but it's very early. We're kind of following them up very closely and trying to work with them towards, like, how does it feel, is this okay, is this not okay, and iterating through going through the moves, actually, and we will be with them next month, actually, to like a 4-day training again, around participation, rewarding of effort, the points, the collaborative agreement. So it's an ongoing process, yeah. But they're still, so they are working with sovereign assets. They are a team of, there is no employment involved, and they're now a team of 8, I think, or 9. So it's going somewhere.
And how does this group manage those sovereign assets? Is that already part of some universal ownership vault? Could that evolve into that, or is that separate?
Yeah, no, it is well, the constructs for the universal ownership vaults are there, and so it is in there. And the DAO is like kind of the Excel I maintain. So we're not there yet. We are currently developing, and so the next 4 or 5 months, we'll be developing the first implementations of the real blockchain version of the thing. So it's progressing on that side as well. But again, it's totally, the code is going to be totally open source, and so there is no gain model associated at this point with anything in there. The only thing I'm trying to maintain here is that it stays sustainable, and that there is no that we do not create something that couldn't be there on its own. And so that's why we're taking small steps now. But for example, the book we've been writing is going to be a sovereign asset as well.
Yeah, so eating your own dog food, that's always good.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
you try that yourself, yeah.
Yeah. So so in other words, once you have it in a software form and therefore scalable, you can move existing sovereign assets out of Excel sheets into a distributed system.
Yeah, that's the, well, that I think that's the next logical step. Now we have so the legal structures are in place, and the mechanics and the people part is being experimented with, and so we're at a point where we think that it all makes sense and that it works for them, and that this could be a thing. and so we're like, the next logical step is to formalize that into a more decentralized way, where I'm not the one keeping the Excel sheet. And that would be the next step, creating the two DAO structures. So the one for the universal ownership vault, and the one that directs the collaborative, which, well, the collaborative is the one using the sovereign asset. And so they are the tools they use. The agreement, which we call the collaborative agreement, is also something that is that comes to existence through conviction voting. And so it's exactly the same mechanics there, but for a different purpose. It's more for handling the internal group stuff.
So just playing that forward. So is there a scenario in which you can see that my drilling machine, I put my drilling machine in there, and or even better, my son's old bike, which is too small for him. We could put that in there, and basically then it starts renting itself out. So it generates token as we put it in. So we hold token that we can use within the system for rent. And we basically let go of the assets, but now it's still physically somewhere, right? It's still physically with us. And now it sits there, and how do we know we're not secretly using it and without paying rent?
Yeah, well, no clue. So we're not at that point yet. So the next bigger sovereign asset that we're integrating at this point is the experience center, which is kind of a property in France with a formal thermal institute with warm water springs and so on. And so we wanted to make this into like an experience center because it allows you to experience and to live the personal concepts and the economic concepts and the whole thing. And so I think that's one of the things we need to put in place as well in order for us to get more people involved, asking the questions about, and how would I handle that? And my answer would be, I've got no clue, but feel free to suggest something. It's not about, and that was very important to me. It was never about creating a system. It's about shaping an environment in which you could start thinking about how would I be comfortable running my things differently, and that's very convenient for me because I don't have to have the answers to everything, and I think that's more what we try to put in place. And I think the book is like is an additional step towards bringing that message out, hopefully getting people in that say, you know what, I'm going to try this out in this in that way, and we're going to experiment with it, because I think evolutionary theory says that you cannot change if you don't break stuff and rebuild it differently. And so let's try step by step to evolve towards something. Is this system going to fork and create very different childs? Maybe they'll merge again later. I don't know. I've got no idea. And worst case, nobody cares, and I'm just having fun for the rest of my life, which is also fine in a sense. I think it's valuable to like experiment with it and try to see things a little bit differently, because they're not fundamentally different. It's still rent, it's still property, it's still there are no like completely world-changing new inventions in there, whether it's on the technical or the legal or the administrative side or the human side. We all make use of techniques and theories and practices that have been in place for many years, and so there is nothing really completely new in there. And so it's only a question about putting it together and seeing if something comes out of it, and if that's
well. And apparently there's at least a group of people of 8 that have been using it for 2 years now, right? So
exactly. So that's already good.
So maybe my answer, my question about the bike can be answered in terms of groups. So you can never become a member alone, but like in the Grameen version, you have to be a part of a group of 8 people who are accountable for each other to a certain extent, or not accountable for each other, but hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
So so you have to form such a group to become part of the system. So you are actually a cell of accountability, so to say.
Well, at this point, from a sovereign assets perspective, we would only transact with a collaborative, and a collaborative is a group of people that have a collaborative agreement. And in a sense, at this point, I never thought about saying, oh, but you should be at least 2 to have a collaborative agreement, because in that sense, if I want to rent out an apartment and I'm on my own, then that would be a problem. So maybe it is okay to be alone in some perspective, but the collaborative agreement is not only about collaboration, it's also about your mindset, your attitude, your commitment to what you're doing. So you express yourself in a certain way, and I think you don't need other people to be a good human. You can just be a good human yourself. And yes, you could cheat the system, and as you said, there are 2% that we need to deal with those, but I think they'll deal with themselves, because at some point you only have one identity. So and in a decentralized system, if you screw up your identity, then you're probably, well,
you're marked for life. Okay, so
yeah, I think, well, I don't know if you're marked for life, but at least you are the result of your actions. And I didn't think thoroughly about how can one redeem itself or whatever. We are far from at that stage yet, but again, those are all tensions that we are going to experience at some point, and we're gonna find ways of working around these tensions within the few specifics that we have pointed out in this environment that should be different. Like, for example, the separation of power and money, because those are 2 non-negotiables. And
so I can so I received token. Let's put, so we put a bike in, we found a solution for all of this, we put a bike in, we received some token. Now my son wants to use this token for renting a camera. Right, that would work, but we cannot buy.
Yes or no, because that's not certain. The token is actually a representation of your bike.
Yeah.
So the value of your token is the value someone else thinks. Well, if I want to buy the token, so if I want to give you money, and money or some other service for that matter, it doesn't matter. If I want to give you something, then I need to like evaluate the worth or the value of your token, and it's represented by the bike, which is a sovereign asset. So in most cases, what you would do is, like, you go to a liquidity marketplace and you get a loan or money for your token as a collateral. And with that money, you go do something else, which makes it a little bit easier. Otherwise, you end up in a barter system where you exchange value of a camera for value of a bike, and which could also work. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I think it creates more friction than if you go to a liquidity marketplace where you say, I want money from my token, and with that money, I go get another something that I want, which is like a camera in this case.
Okay. So it's not liquid immediately. It's just a representation. Okay. So
and in the case of your bike, where and that's, I think that's a very good edge case, because then if I go to a liquidity marketplace and I say, okay, I've got this sovereign asset, and here is my token, and the sovereign asset is actually a bike, and it's in my garage, then the one who is willing to finance that token, well, is gonna have he's going to need to have a very big risk profile to say, yeah, sure, here's $100, no problem. Just take it, because the risk to reward is very high. If you default on your loan, then that person gets your bike tokens, but if your bike is not in your garage anymore, then it's game over, right? So there is no
okay.
So I think it's gonna be depending on what kind of tokens you have, what kind of liquidity marketplace there is, and who invests in what. And so real estate will probably be easier because it's more static and you're more sure that it's there than a bike in your garage. But there's a world of differences there. And I think, for example, in the bike, an American investor will probably not buy the bike in your garage, but your local community around, which knows where the bike is and what it is, they might say, oh, you know what, that's no problem. I can lend you $100 and I give you a bike as a collateral. And so that's fine. So you might find ways in which to find liquidity in local communities for that kind of stuff as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be a global market.
So that's the built-in forcing function towards local community.
Yeah, for example, those are one of the possible externalities. Yeah. But at least, and I think that's the main thing about it. That is, once you put that thing in place, then all your preconceived ways of thinking become like slightly different, and you can start envisioning all kinds of new scenarios. Some of them are interesting, but not necessarily working. Others will be working, and I'm sure we're going to see a whole lot of creativity around what can be done and how this can take shape.
Of course, absolutely. So, do you have a name for all of this?
Well, yeah. So I think we've named multiple, but the overarching name of the thing we're doing is we're building a quality of life world. That's I think it's a world around quality of life and around the 8 life domains and around taking better care of those. And one of the ways in which we achieve this is through person-to-person collaboration, and that's also one of the key vectors. And so those two ones, the book is called Person to Person, obviously, change your life and fix the world. So that's kind of the idea that we put in there. And I think it's moving towards more quality of life.
Yeah. Now, the reason why I'm asking is if somebody wants to track this and say, okay, I want to put my group of people as a collaborative into this DAO when it gets launched. What do I track? So is there a way to stay in the loop?
Yeah, we're putting in place stuff to come out a little bit more. I think the fact of writing the book was one of the necessities to bring this message out. Most of the times, and we experienced that 2 years ago, the ideas were still forming and it was still a lot of a mess. And I think we've come to a point where we at least can coherently explain what it's all about. So coming out and trying to show some stuff is on the agenda. So we have the qualityoflife.world, which is or QOL.world, which is the main site. There's not much to see at this point, but that's definitely one of the places where
QOL.world is where one could go to like stay in the loop if they want.
That will definitely publish whatever we do there, and that's where we move forward. And otherwise, I'm on Twitter. You can track me there. That's just at Joeri. That's it.
Cool. So I'm charged with thoughts now about what kind of assets and people I would try this with awesome. To see, but I can totally see that this could be one version of a operating system for local economies that have the potential, as you said in the beginning, to be interlinked. So I see more clearly now. Still not sure about the real mechanics of how that would factor in if my asset were a global satellite network. But yeah.
Those are the advanced cases.
Yeah.
And
Advanced
we'll work
cases.
through them one at a time.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to unpack so many edge cases here, but
no, I think it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting, and I think that's always what I like when I talk to you. You unpack stuff that I'm not unpacking every day. So it's interesting to give it some thought as well. And I'm certainly, this is certainly going to keep turning in my head as well, and see if the plan keeps on fitting, and if the pieces keeps on doing what they do. But I think eventually, because it's built with an evolutionary principle from the base, I believe we can do all kinds of stuff with it. It's just a question of like.
So evolving DAOs is a hard thing purely from a technical perspective, right? So
I don't think so. I don't think so. The way, and that's then we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. so that's actually that's whatever I explained here is like, that's my hobby. My job is actually figuring out that kind of systems. And so I'm going to do evolutionary DAOs in between now and in 6 months. Then you'll have something that works based on this conviction voting scheme, would make DAO governance transparent and evolutionary. And obviously a DAO is you give it something to do. It's not today you rent out bikes and tomorrow you do satellite networks, because that's not what they are meant to do. But if the domain is specified, then you can be very evolutionary even inside a DAO. And the most important thing is that as your value is not linked anymore to your activity, because your value is personal, your activity is in group, then entering and exiting DAOs isn't a thing anymore. You are with groups when you feel good about them, and you exit when you don't feel good about it. And that's way more flexible and way more fluid. And so DAOs will work around a set of parameters that are changeable, even if we are talking blockchain.
Okay, yeah, it's changing parameters, yes. Changing entire contracts is a bit more tricky, right?
Well, but changing a contract is and that depends. If you want to change a contract from being a bike to being a satellite network, that's a fundamental change in a contract. Yeah. But for example, I'm a universal ownership vault, and I need to deal with this entire set of parameters. That's something that you could make into something that evolves. And if you want to add some parameters, I agree with you, then you need a hard fork, you need to change. And that's a little bit more complicated, although it's the same principle, because hard forking one version to another is nothing more than having a bunch of people agree that the new version will be better than the previous version. And so even there, and I think the Cardano network does that. They have these hard fork combinator events, and so they are. It's still centrally directed at this point, but the evolution they envision is also to a more community-driven forking. And so once you get your process okay, and your way of steering the process okay, then I have no doubt that we can fork DAOs and evolve them in pretty flexible ways.
It's very interesting. So if we're lucky, we might have a concrete case that we can maybe test this with in Africa,
Cool.
where we're looking at how to set up farmer cooperatives with on top of blockchain.
I would be very happy to help you with that.
Thank you. Yeah, so if anything evolves there, then I'll definitely loop you in.
Reach out. That's perfect. Awesome. I'm always up for a challenge.
Cool. Amen.
All right. Thank
I
you
feel
very
complete
much
for
Thomas.
today. I learned a lot. Thank
That's
you
awesome.
so much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. It was a pleasure as always.
Okay. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. See you
Thank you
soon.
very much. See you